I'm Tanys.
And I'm Jenn.
And this is Twillow Talk. Today we have a very special guest, Lisa J. Weiss of Eye of the Storm Coaching and Consulting. Welcome, Lisa. How are you today?
I'm fantastic. Thank you so much for having me here today. I'm really excited for the conversation.
It's our pleasure. So tell us a little bit about what you do. Let's let them know sort of what your background is so that as we go forward, they'll understand where you're coming from.
Right. So I am the founder of Eye of the Storm Coaching and Consulting. And as the name says, the eye is very important. And so I work with individuals in what I call helping them reclaim the leader that lives inside of them, their leader self. And so I run programs that I call leader self empowerment, which is helping people to come back to that core, to align to that core that lives inside of them so that then they can emanate out into the world very differently. You know, emanate their true self, as opposed to how we've been culturally conditioned to take everything that's happening outside of us and then adjusting to that. And so I work with individuals who are feeling lost, disconnected, frustrated, misunderstood, and really want to find themselves again and then live from that internal reference point. My background is communications, and so my superpower is words and the vibrations that words hold as we speak to ourselves inside ourselves and outside of ourselves. And so noticing where we expand and where we contract. And so that's me in a nutshell. Oh, and I'm also an author, an upcoming author. I have a book coming out in the fall, and it's called Emerge, Be the Authentic Leader in Your Field. And my chapter is entitled The Leader Within. And so that is, again, guided towards people leading from an internal reference point.
That's awesome. Great. Well, we're really happy to have you.
Thank you.
So as we usually do on Twillow Talk, what we're going to do is we have the cards. These, and they have themes on them. So we're going to shuffle the cards and just see what comes out for us to chat about today. What did we have last time, Jen? Do you remember? We had wisdom at one point, but I think there was a different one last time.
Yeah, we've had a couple.
We're still pretty early on in this little journey of ours, but we've done a few. So let's see what comes out. This one. Oh, perfect. Our word is authenticity.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Beautiful.
And what it says is, when you are genuine and honest, people sense your integrity and respond by trusting you. Your relationships then become rich and rewarding. People feel safe around you, and this ultimately serves you well. Your guidance is to review your life honestly, inspect those areas in which you are not being completely true to yourself, and be ready to change them. Aspire to be totally authentic, and the universe will respond by opening doors to outcomes better than you could ever imagine. And the affirmation is, I am genuine and honest. So that's kind of an interesting theme for us, because that's one of the themes that we work with a lot on Twillow Talk, is really that authenticity, right? We always come on here and just have authentic conversation about topics. So what does that say to you, Jen? Authenticity, what does that mean to you?
I love the idea of authenticity in so many ways, because we want to not only show up in an authentic way in our relationships and the things that we do, but also really understanding how to be authentic with ourselves and bringing that authenticity in as well as out. When I work with clients from a counseling perspective, we do a lot of work with, really wanting to become that authentic person, right? So whether it's with parts therapy and accepting all of our different parts and how they are all important, and we need to find that kind of congruence. I think congruence and authenticity go really well together, in understanding that, we have to be able to really understand all of these different things as they show up for us in order to be authentic. And then, even from a person-centered kind of approach, we talk about this, showing up authentically with clients, right? And being able to acknowledge, when we are off, when things aren't going perfectly. We don't have to be, always okay, you know?
Yeah.
And I think that that's another big piece of authenticity that often gets kind of pushed to the side, because part of being authentic is not being perfect, being perfectly imperfect, being able to accept the fact that we are a work in progress, right? We are always self-actualizing. We are never self-actualized. This is a journey, and being authentic on that journey is really what the journey is about.
Mhm. Yeah, that perfectly imperfect, that's something, I've used that a lot with my clients for sure. Because, we get into these mindsets of needing to be what everybody else thinks we should be. And that becomes our state of perfection. And there's really a cognitive dissonance there. If you're just trying to make everybody else happy, you're not being authentic to yourself, right? You're not really listening to what you need and who you are. So it does create that sort of dissonance, I would say. It sounds to me like, Lisa, you deal a lot with that concept as well, in terms
Yeah.
of that I self.
Absolutely, and as you were reading, I jotted down a couple of things, to it's that journey home, right?
Mm.
That authentic self, for me, it encompasses that journey home. And when I'm working with my clients, a lot of the conversations are around, how do we honor ourselves, right? So I often ask the question, are you willing to honor yourself, right? It's because when we honor ourselves, ultimately we honor others, right? And even if people don't agree with the things that we're choosing, somewhere inside of them, they know that they are being honored. And some people, we don't know how to honor ourselves because our society doesn't raise us in that way. It has us looking outside of ourselves. And so this journey home, to come back inside and to decipher what is really meaningful for our capital S self to move through the world, right? That for me is really how we, the journey for showing up, right? And the whole imperfectly imperfect is so true, right? We are human. We are here to explore and make mistakes, and it's only when we do those things, or we make those mistakes, or things don't go the way we want, where we get to discover more about who we are and what we're capable of, right? So authenticity is that, and it requires vulnerability. And I know from myself in my journey, that was a 4-letter word, right? To be vulnerable, and until I discovered the strength that was actually embedded in it. So yeah, I love the word authenticity. And I boil it down to saying yes to myself might sound like a no outside of me, but if that's saying yes to ourselves.
And that's kind of that cognitive dissonance thing I was talking about, right? Because like the yes to you could seem no to somebody else.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
As well as the outside world.
Yeah.
In terms of everyone.
Yeah. One of the things that came up for me as you were sharing, Lisa, is one of the things I love to work on with my clients is values and values-based action, and how when we are operating from a place of our values and what really brings meaning to us, oftentimes that means not pleasing others. And, but when we're able to go back and say, like, I'm doing this because this is important to me, this honors my values, it gives us a strength because we're in that congruence with what's important. We're being authentic. And there's such a solid foundation there that even when others don't agree or don't think that what we're doing is right, if we know that that's what we're operating from and we bring that on this authenticity into it, we can also operate from a place of love as opposed to a place of shame or guilt. And that is so powerful.
Mhm. Yeah. What that in the invitation that what you were just saying, the word that popped up for me, selfish. Right. That's a big word. And I look at the Newtonian definition of selfish and the quantum definition of selfish. On the Newtonian side, selfish is when there's an FU at the end of it. On the quantum side, it is, I'm choosing, like you said, I'm choosing from a place that's deeply meaningful for me, and I'm honoring myself. And in that, I'm honoring you. And so when people, will say to me, "Oh, Lisa, you're selfish," I say, "Yes."
It's so against all that programming though, right? That we have our kids. So, doing that sort of reprogramming of how we look at even that word, selfish.
Yes. Putting myself first.
Yeah.
What's meaningful for me, I think is, that is definite reprogramming that has to go on, because there's so much tied to the word selfish and carrying the load and martyr and all these things that are attached to the Newtonian, and resentment that's tied to it. Right?
Well, and being an empath brings in another whole side of that, right? So when you're an empath, having other people be happy is a bit selfish in a sense, the good selfish, because their emotions are not affecting you then, but there's healthier ways of doing that, right? If we manage our energy, do our own work, that kind of stuff, we won't have as much impact from other people's emotions. But I think when you're an empath and you don't realize it, we go through life trying to keep everybody else happy because we know that we feel better. We don't necessarily cognitively think, so if they're happy, I'm happy, or if they're happy, I'm not feeling their angst. But somewhere in that subconscious, we know that if everybody's happy, my body feels better. So I'm going to keep everybody happy, right? So it's kind of that catch-22 thing for empaths, right? They struggle with that because they want to keep everybody happy so they're comfortable, but then, you tend to not do everything that you want to do because you're trying to keep everybody else happy. So you ignore your own authentic self.
Right. Yeah. And I think that's a really good point. And especially when you're young and you don't know, right? You don't know any better. And as we get older, and that's where the resentment comes in, right? Because now you get mad that you've got to keep all these balls up in the air for everybody else. And then there's the what about me? And that learning of, oh, right, everything that moves inside of you belongs to you.
Right.
And, and everything that moves inside of me belongs to me. And so there's that journey of discomfort in feeling what other people feel and knowing, okay, well, this discomfort is mine. And now how do I choose to engage that?
Right.
Right? Yeah, I think
Exactly.
it is that journey, and the journey back home.
Yeah. And then I love taking that even just a little bit more into even what I think is mine isn't always mine. Right.
Yes.
And then going into that, right? Because we have all of these, because I loved how you said, the big S self, right? But we have all of these little selves or little egos or little I's, whatever terminology you want to use for it, that we think we are. And they're not who we are. right? And so understanding that they're all like conditioned beliefs and patterns and things that we've developed to deal with the world and to cope, and ways that we want to show up because it's our ideal self of what we want to present as, but not necessarily who we authentically are.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. It's like, using your example, a tree, right?
Yeah.
When you come to this, the stump of the tree, it's whole and it's there. But then as you look at a tree, it goes off this way and this way and this way and this way. And each branch, depending on where the sun is shining, is going to grow a certain way, and all of this. And it's this back to wholeness. It's all me. Right. And this journey of, well, I don't like this aspect of me and I don't like that aspect of me. Well, yeah. And it's all you and it's all me. Right. So there, that unconditional love. So, I'm tying authenticity and unconditional love of myself
Mhm.
in that.
Mhm.
Yeah. Very
Yeah.
interesting, eh? I know it, and you're just so much more in flow too, right? When you're being true to yourself, life seems to be in flow.
Yeah.
I know for me, when I was starting my businesses, right, I had to decide, because I'm certified HR professional and Reiki master and all that stuff. So I was trying to decide which type of business to start. So, of course, you end up hearing from your family and your friends and all of that stuff. And I was like, okay, well, I guess I'd better do HR, right? Which is perfectly fine. I mean, I can do both. I've got the schooling for both. I'm quite capable of doing both. I started the HR business and was like, yeah, it's a bit, there's resistance there. There was like a resistance. And so it ended up all of this, I just got to a point where I was like, well, I need to be authentic. I need to be who I am, which does include the Reiki piece. And so I started both businesses. And when I did that, everything became more in flow, right? So it was becoming that authentic self that spurred the whole journey forward for me, being able to be like, okay, yeah, I am a certified HR professional, but you know what? I'm also a Reiki master and a Celtic shamanic high priestess and a crystal master. And, I do these other things too. So that's okay. Because, the ones that are going to accept you doing the HR, for me, the ones that accept me doing the HR, they need to be able to accept who I am in my entirety. Because otherwise there's going to be friction anyway, because there's resistance there.
Yeah, that's really cool. So, the word for me there is and, right? It's not an either or. It's this and this. And as human beings, we have the capacity to hold what we perceive to be opposites,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because we're all of it, right? So I am this and this, right? And what am I choosing in that, right? That choice of, oh, right, am I willing to own that aspect of myself?
Mm-hmm.
Right. And this is where we struggle as humans, because we love living double standards. And waiting.
And yet I think that there's a part of us that wants everything so black and white, so clear cut, so like there is no room or wiggle space or whatever. And yet we have this grand dichotomy in which we exist, right? I mean, like we talk like on a spiritual, this idea of oneness and how we are all really connected and we are all one. And yet we do each show up as expressions, unique expressions of that oneness. And so there is that kind of give and take and push and pull and all that happens. And I loved, you're talking about this and I love that because when I work with clients, a lot of times when we look at suffering, at trauma and things like that, it's really hard, especially, I'm going to use childhood trauma, right? If we're talking about something that happened with a parent, like it's really hard to get to the point of my parents loved me and they hurt me.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And to accept that there is an and there. And it's, and it is an and, it's not a but, because those two things did happen together. Right. And when, we were talking about like with what I was saying earlier about like parts and the parts of us that need to show up, right? Like I am light, but I am also dark.
Mhm.
I am love, but I also like have this experience of hate. And where does that come from? And understanding that, like if something makes me angry and I don't authentically express that this really bothers me, that pushing down and suppressing and not allowing myself to be authentic is where the anger bubbles up and where the explosions happen. And that's not authentically who I am. Authentically, who I am is this person who has the vulnerability and the strength to show up and say, that really hurt me.
Yeah.
That is not okay. I cannot accept that in my reality.
Yeah.
There's definitely like this myth almost, right? In the spiritual community that we're supposed to be happy, love, and light all the time. I think there's a danger with that. That's like the woohoo that people talk about. It's not the actual authentic spiritual journey. It's like the woohoo spiritual journey, right? In terms of people think, well, you're supposed to be all love and light, and why are you not all love and light? Well, I'm human first, right? And humans have emotions. That's why we came here, was to experience the whole gamut of emotions. We're not here just to be just happy. And like you said, Jen, if you're happy all the time, you're likely suppressing something, which will come back in some form or another later on, right? So
and it takes pressure, it takes struggle, it takes like things not being comfortable for change to happen.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I mean, they talk about this in so many different things that if we were just completely comfortable with things the way they are, we would never progress, we would never change. And yet the whole purpose of us being here is to be on a journey and to grow and to change. And we can't do that without pressure. We can't do that without difficulties, challenges, people pushing our buttons, setting off triggers, bringing up these things in us that we don't necessarily want to look at, but that are so important in this journey.
Yes. For me, that is in the realm of owning the truth of my experience.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And declaring my truth. It's like, yes, and we have the right to feel everything that we feel.
Exactly.
Right? So to your point of when we're angry and going, okay, ooh, and this belongs to me. So in my journey, right, I suppressed that. I hold a lot of intensity. And when I was younger, when I blew, it was blood and guts everywhere, right? And then we learn mop up, right? You gotta feel guilty about that and stuff. And so it wasn't until, as part of my journey and my coaching designation where I got to understand that intensity, the thing that we call anger or jealousy or frustration, right? That's intensity, and intensity lives in everything. We don't question intensity when we're happy and joyous and in ecstasy. We only question it when it's on what we label the negative side of the line, right? And so in a lot of my work, and this is where the words come in, right? It's like if we were to take away the word and we were to focus on the sensation and the intensity of the sensation and go, am I willing to relax into the sensation that's there? Knowing that that is what contains the information, then it's the invitation for a completely different experience.
Yes.
Right? Yeah. I teach
the labels that we put on it, right?
Oh my God. Yes. And so
come with judgment.
Yes.
Of self, judgment of others. It's the labels that bring the judgment.
Yes. And we all experience these things that we call emotions differently. So if I were to say to you, Tanys, how do you experience anger? And Jennifer, how do you experience anger? I bet you'd come up with, if you tapped into your sensory cues, very different experiences of anger.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I
Definitely.
cry. I just cry.
Yeah, you know, and so that expression of that. And so it's interesting, over the last few years, I find myself using less and less words, like I feel angry or whatever. And so I'm more like, ooh, there's a heat happening in my belly, or my face is getting really hot here, or oh, my chest is really tensing up. And that actually has become an invitation for a much more authentic conversation to happen with someone else, because it kind of eliminates the blame. You know, we have this thing about being human. You make me feel.
Yeah.
When no one can make me feel anything.
No.
Yeah.
I feel what I feel. And so that, yeah, the words and the sensations and being able to decipher the sensations. You know, a lot of my journey, I lived up here a lot and was cut off from the bottom down. And so to learn, oh, my body's actually telling me something. Right. So that, back to the authenticity is, first, I have to notice what's actually going on inside of me in order to then express authentically what's there.
And I'm sure you guys know these people too. They don't even know what is going on inside of them. Never mind how to express, right?
Yes.
They're very cut off from themselves. Like they're very it's like they've got a wall around themselves. So they're just not even seeing what's happening. Yeah. And they don't feel their body in that way. They're not in their body.
Yeah. As we're talking about it, like one of the things that I really love, and it's in so many different spiritual teachings, is this idea of life being a movie show, right? And how we are to be watching it like we would watch a movie. And yet so often we decide that we're going to jump up there and play a role on the screen because we think like, oh, well, this is what's going on for me. This is my thing, right? And so we get all in that role, and yet it's just an experience. It's just a passing, right? And it's the same with feelings, with thoughts, all of it, right? It's just this passing experience. And yet we go so all in that no longer am I observing an experience of anger. I am angry, right? And it becomes this like full on, we've embraced it, we've embodied it, we have taken this on, as opposed to sitting back and going, wow, there it is. Okay, that's what anger is right now. That's what's showing up. Wow, look at what it looks like. As Lisa said, look at what it feels like. Ooh, okay, that's an interesting feeling, right? And kind of going into it and understanding, and then, even taking it in and going, okay, wow, okay, I've felt this feeling before. What was going on then? Oh, is that coming up for me again? Okay, when else did I feel this feeling? Oh, remember when this, right? And because everything compounds and compounds, like all of the way that we see the world, they talk about like rose-colored glasses or the tinted lens through which we see things. And it's like we're constantly adding on some tint, right, to our glasses.
Every experience, right, changes
right?
who we are.
Well, yeah, because we continue to see things the way we see them. So we're adding that conditioning to every new experience. And if we don't ever stop, it just keeps on going and going.
Absolutely. And it's like, then you got to sort of like jackhammer the concrete, right? It's been buried in, so you got to really dig into it. And, going back to your thoughts, Tanys, on, them not being there, there are states of being that run under the surface of who we are. And what you were describing that's for me, that disembodied state. I'm not even in here. I'm watching everything from up here, right? And and safety and trust and all these things come into it. Like, can I trust being in here? Right? Because our intellect then wants to say, this is overwhelmed, this is too much, you can't handle it. Right? And I often say we use the intellect like the hard drive, and it's actually the mouse. It's there to choose.
Yes. Yes.
And this is the hard drive. And so what you were talking about earlier, I said, that was me. I was poster child for that. No connection to what was going on in my body. And, you know, my intellect overrode everything going on in my body. And it was a journey to reclaim this and, you know, sort of turn everything around and go, oh, this is the hard drive. And this is there to choose.
Yeah, it's true. It's like taking on that quiet observer role. That's what you were talking about, Jen, with the, you know, being able to sit back and go, oh, what is this for, you know? And the quiet observer is somewhat out here, but a lot of it is here, right? A lot of it is like sitting in the heart going, okay, this is uncomfortable, but I'm going to observe this rather than jumping through with a reaction, right? It's that action versus reaction sort of mode.
Well, the observer realizes that this too shall pass, right? That everything is temporary. And even like what Lisa was saying about the extremes, right? Like we label the excitement and all as good and great and wonderful. And then the sorrow and the sadness is horrible and we don't like it and we don't want it. And yet, like in the Sufi tradition, they talk about that middle road, right? Because the more we allow for the good extremes, the more we set ourselves up for the very bad extremes, right? And so by being that observer, we're not jumping headfirst into any of the extremes. We're just watching them, and we're watching them flow. And as we watch them flow, we tend to take on this more neutral kind of observation where we still feel the joys, we still feel the sorrows, we still experience those things, and yet they don't pull us. They don't knock us down, right? They don't just drag us along, take us for a ride, and then dump us off when they're done with us. You know, instead, we've taken over the driver's seat. And we're like, yeah, you know what? I am in control of this. And I can allow myself to feel all of the different feelings. And they're all okay.
Yes. Yes.
Right? And they're all beneficial.
Yeah. They all play a role.
It is. When I was going through my separation divorce process, and I remember saying, thinking, I'm not going to be victim. I'm not going to be victim. I'm not going to be victim. Right? Kept looking back. I'm not going to be victim. I'm not going to be victim. And it took a while, and then one day it hit me. I can have the experience of victim and not be victim. Right? I am not responsible for the choices that other people make, and to own the truth of my experience in that. And that was huge for me in that. And, you know, as I work with clients, it's that owning the truth it's as easy as taking a breath, and it's as hard as taking a breath. Right? To own that truth and the intensity that comes with all of it. And you take that fire breath and you own it, right? You know, my mentor once said, you know, don't spew it on other people. Don't give it away. Own it, right? Let it fill every cell in your body. And then, you know, it's only when that happens that we then get to what's under the surface of it. So, you know, what you were saying, Jennifer, about the observer, right? It that's the invitation to go, ooh, okay, this is a really interesting thing. And what's under that? Like, where did that come from?
Well, and our true selves is that divine essence, right? That initial spark. That's the true self. A lot of this other stuff is stuff that we've been told to feel, told to think. And that's not really the authentic true self.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I know Jen and I have had conversations about that, right? That there's a lot of like, you know, when you're working through shame and stuff like that, well, that's not the true you. Yeah, you know what? People make mistakes and we all have to be responsible for our own actions and reactions. But the true you is that divine self
Mhm.
within. And that's kind of how I see that authenticity piece, is
Yeah.
that divine self. And then the vulnerability comes in when you start to express who that divine self is in all its good, bad, everything, right?
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, and we've created a planet of 8 billion people so that we can do this dance.
Mm-hmm.
We create these people in our worlds, and I'm a big sci-fi fan, so I create people on my holodeck, right? So that I get to have these experiences, and it's not always fun and it's not always easy, and yet I know at the end of the day I become more.
Yeah.
Right.
I love that analogy of creating people on your holodeck. I love that because, even just in this session, right? And we're talking and stuff, and I can say, I know who Tanys is to me. I know who Lisa is to me, and I know who I am to me. I'm the only person that we are all who I think we are.
Yes. Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And so it is such a beautiful analogy, like creating on the holodeck, because it's true. There is this being called Tanys, there is this being called Lisa, and this being called Jennifer. And yet who we are to ourselves, who we are to each other is different for every single one of us.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And that is like amazing.
It is.
You're welcome.
And the authenticity piece behind that is that we want to make sure that we're portraying the same thing, but the other people's perception of what we portray is where the difference is in that holodeck thing, right?
Absolutely. I teach a public speaking course, and what I say to my students is, you can prepare the best talk. You never know what someone's going to hear.
Yes.
Right. And so when I'm in conversation with people, I never say you said. What I say is I heard.
Mm-hmm.
Because all those things that we talked about, the perceptual filters and the conditioning and our upbringing and all of that is happening while we're in conversation. So we have no idea. I have no idea what you two are hearing.
True. And that's part of these talks, right? Is we come into these and we just have to trust that whoever sees these, they're going to hear whatever it is they're meant to hear out of it, even if that's not what we say.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
And the other part of that is hearing one thing and understanding it in a different way as well, right?
Totally.
Oh,
How many times are we in conversation where we think we're on the same page? And
chills around that. That's a good thing. It's okay.
And they go off and they do something. Well, we just talked about that. Yeah, but that's what we agreed on. Right?
There's all sorts of tools, right? Like the repeating back what you understand and all of that sort of stuff, which helps. But really,
sometimes
there's still always room for this interpretation piece that we all fall into, right? Yeah. Depending on the role that we're playing.
Yeah, and these beautiful situations that we create so that we can discover. I remember I was running a program once, and it was in my home, and we were there for breakfast and it was great. And somebody arrived early, and somebody let the person in to what I considered my sacred space before the program. And all of a sudden I could feel my body tensing up and all of that. And I just thought, okay, this is really interesting. And it's like I had no control over it. Right. And then the person that let the person in, they had their own experience. And then the person that came in had their own experience. And so we went upstairs because my program was upstairs, and I started the day and I said, okay, I'm going to express my truth of what happened this morning. And this is what I experienced. And then the person went, oh my God, well, this is what I experienced. And as we all shared, I went, wow, wasn't that a beautiful co-creation? Because if that hadn't happened that way, I would not have learned that this lived inside of me, right? You wouldn't have learned that lived, right? And so that's when I realized, this is a dance. Yeah. This is a co-creative process for us to discover all these things about ourselves with other people.
Yeah. I love that. And going back to what you were saying, because it brought up, so before when you're talking about the whole victim thing, right? Because I've had a very similar experience with, going through my own separations and divorce and stuff like that. And I remember as I went through it thinking it was so horrible. And it was like the worst experiences. And it was devastating on many levels. And yet I look at it now and I'm so very grateful for all of those experiences because of what came up for me and what it taught me and all of that. And I feel like, as we're talking about roles and the roles that we all play in this dance, and it's so easy to be like, oh, that person is horrible. They did all these horrible things. And yet it's like, wow, thank you for taking on that role in my life for me to be where I need to be right now. And it just, oh, I've like goosebumps everywhere. It like changes everything about how we show up, how we see these experiences, our ability to have experiential acceptance, to really be in the moment and allow and be authentic and be like, this hurts right now, but there's so much more going on.
Yeah, totally.
Brings me to the soul contracts thing, right? So before we come down, we sign all these soul contracts. Sign them like physically. We get these soul contracts going with our with our soul family, right? To come down and okay, so we're going to meet when we're like 4. We're going to learn how to share, and we're going to meet when we're 16 and learn about new love, and so we have all these contracts with people that put us in the most opportune place to actually learn things. So our soul is not surprised that we're going through this, right? People, you probably signed a soul contract for this. It's that human side of us that's going, wait a minute, I signed up for this.
Right.
Why?
Right.
And it's the why that's the important part.
Yeah. It is that. And, when you look at tragedy and loss, and, I worked at a children's hospital for 14 years. And, you hear later, as I was on my journey and having conversations, people go, well, I wouldn't choose to come and have, this. Why would I choose to come and have, as a child, have leukemia or whatever? And I'm like, right. Because I said, we think of that as it's the human choosing, and it's not the human choosing. It's the soul that's choosing to come and have an experience, and all the people involved in that, like you were saying, Tanys, that contract of what am I going to discover? And, our human experience is one of forgetting, right? We have forgotten what we are. And this journey back home, this journey back to the core, this journey back to the I, that authentic self, that is the journey. To remember what we are.
Yeah. Bringing us back to our authentic self, that state of authenticity.
Yeah. And it never ends, No. And that's my polite way of saying it.
Yes. Yeah. That's, we've talked about this before, we are always going to be learning. We are always going to be doing our own healing work. We're always going to be on this journey while we're here. It's not something that you just get all your healing work done and it's done. It's not, because self-discovery is endless.
Yeah. That's back to your point that you made earlier, Tanys, about being it all love and acceptance and all that. That's not why we're here. Have you seen the planet?
Especially right now, but anyway. We're in that chaos state, the state of learning. We are learning.
This is about about being in the muck. This is about, rolling around in it, discovering, oh, whoa, woohoo, here comes my life, right? When I say, what's the next thing that's going to rock my world? I really have to stop saying that. And it rocks
Careful
my
what
world.
you ask for.
And then I go, woohoo, here comes my life. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think when we really go back to, authenticity and what that is, it's being willing to be on the journey,
Mhm.
right? There's so many that are just resistant to everything that this life offers and all of the experiences and all of the feelings. And, we've been doing this Star Trek thing. I'm going to go with the Borg. Resistance is futile,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
Are connected. Sorry. Yeah.
And if that is the experience that I have come to know, right? And I think this is where that unconditional love, and we're always going to judge. We're human. We're going to judge.
Yeah.
And yet I go, that is your journey, right? And so if that is the journey that you're here, I sometimes choose the easy button, I prefer the easy button. And I found myself in situations where I was like, I'm going to struggle through this. I'm going to make this hard on myself.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then, one day I go, now I'm going to choose easy.
Yeah.
There's intelligence. I think we forget that there's intelligence in everything, in every choice that we make.
Yeah.
There's intelligence that lives within it.
Yeah, for sure. And, we can pull on the different things. I mean, we touched on this earlier too, about, heart versus head, right? And what intelligence are we drawing on? Are we drawing on that intelligence from the heart? Or are we going to draw on the intelligence from the head? And that's, oftentimes our fear lives in our head. Other parts too, if you're looking at Chinese medicine, but they I can't remember which one. I just read it, but I can't remember. Anyway, we have other parts that hold other emotions, but your fear often gets triggered with the head stuff, right? Whereas if you're trying to make decisions and live from the heart, it's much more love-based, which is a higher vibration emotion.
Yeah.
Right. So in essence, it's healthier for us overall to try to learn to make decisions from the heart. And that's where that authentic piece comes in. Because if we're making it from the heart, that is where our authenticity lies. It is where we draw that from.
Yeah. That is, and it for me, it comes down to that word choice, right? What am I choosing for myself? And to know that every choice I make in the moment is perfect. And what I think we forget is, and we have the right to change our mind, right? So I make a choice, I see the result of my choice, and then I get to go, oh, I get to change my mind now. And I think, as humans, we've been on this train of, you made your bed, now lie in it, and all these words that we use. And it's just like, no, we have the right to change our mind, because until I made the choice, I didn't know. Right? I only knew as much as I knew up until I made the choice. And now I have new information.
So now I want to make a different choice.
I want to make a different choice. Yes. 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 Definitely.
Yeah. It's such an interesting box we put ourselves in as we grow in this world, right? And we form all of these beliefs and all of these schemas and all of these different things that kind of run our whole way of seeing the world. And they're not, as we've been saying this whole time, like they're not authentically who we are. And even Tanys, like you were talking about with the fear, right? And fear comes from unknown, uncertainty, the what ifs of our life. And, that authentic part of us, that connected part of us, knows that it doesn't matter what if, it's all okay,
Yeah.
you know? And whether it's our perceived good or our perceived bad, it's still all okay.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah, like the other word that is a word that I'd love to do my best to remove from my vocabulary would be should, right? It implies everybody else's expectation, or it implies my expectation on somebody else.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Kind of like the what if. The should, well, you should do that or else. Or the what if I do that, then this is going to happen. It's the expectation at the end that we're fearful of in both cases, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. But we often we create all of these different scenarios and all of these different things that could happen, that until we're in that moment, we don't know that that's actually going to happen.
Mhm.
You know, and then we are fearful and we worry and we spend all of this time building these scenarios that are going to happen that oftentimes don't ever turn out the way we have, you know, in our 50 million playthroughs have come up with, you know.
Yeah.
And the thing is, even if they do, it's still part of the experience.
Mhm. Yeah. So that is that. So how do you feel about the statement about authenticity being really lived in the moment as well, instead of in the past or in the future, like the authenticity of being in the moment and living in the moment and making the decision at the moment? Because we've talked a bit about that throughout the course of this as well, right? What is it in that moment that is
And
authentic
I think
for us?
only our authentic self can be in the present.
Mhm.
Our authentic self can't, it's not going to go back. It's not going to go forward. I mean, we can get into the whole conversation of time and what that really is, but that's
There's no
another.
time. No time.
A whole other conversation.
But when we think about like authenticity, it's not about my version of the history or my anticipation of the future. It's about how I show up right here, right now.
Mhm.
Yeah. This breath is the only breath that counts. And now this breath is the only breath that counts. Now this breath is the only breath that counts.
Perfect.
Right. And it is, it's that inhaling and exhaling, and when I'm working with my clients, I'll say we have a choice. Stuff is always going to come up from our past, right? And we have a choice of looking back every single time and trying to figure it out, and what was said and what wasn't said and who said it and who didn't say it and blah 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 blah, blah. Or we can stand, have it show up, and then in this breath, in this moment, make a choice that moves me somewhere. And once I make the choice, I see where it moves me to, right? Because it is that, like, that's the choice. Am I choosing to stand present in the now? And this is where it all comes into play when things happen. And depending on the intensity, the question I often ask my clients is, how old are you in that moment? Because we get transported back to whatever that point in time, that invitation, that trigger was installed. And so in that moment, we only have the resources of that age. And it's in that remembering, right? To stand in the now and go, oh, I am the X old person that I have the resources in order to engage this in a way that's meaningful. And that's a journey. It's not that we're being inauthentic. It is in that moment, I might be my authentic 4-year-old.
Exactly. Yeah.
In the body of a 50-year-old.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
It's true. That inner child work can be pretty intense and beautiful at
Yeah.
the same time.
Oh yeah. Oh
Right.
yeah. Because not only does she have limited resources, she also has the resources of whatever age we are. So she comes with words, and she comes with, laser sharpness and all of that she didn't have then. And so it becomes an interesting combination.
Mhm.
So how old am I in this conversation?
Yeah.
It's true. Yeah. So what's it triggering in you?
Mm-hmm.
Very cool. Well, this has been a lovely conversation. I thank you so much for joining us tonight, Lisa. It's been amazing. This
Thank you.
authentic conversation about authenticity.
Love it.
It's lovely. Can you tell everybody where they can reach you, please?
Sure. They can find me through my website. So as you say, my name, Eye of the Storm Coaching and Consulting. I'm also on Facebook as Eye of the Storm Coaching and Consulting. And I'm on Instagram, Eye of the Storm.
Awesome.
So if they look up, look up Eye of the Storm Coaching and Consulting, they can reach me through my website, my Facebook, my LinkedIn, my Instagram.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, it was such an honor to have you on the show and join us for this conversation. Thank you again, Jenn. As always, we've made it through another one. Authentic Conversations on Twillow Talk. Thank you all for joining us.